welcome back to my channel, Diamonds and Washi. My name is Katie, and today I am here with my weekly WIP and Chat. If you're new or aren't sure what that means, WIP stands for Work in Progress, and Chat just means that we are going to take some time to chat and catch up a little bit today. I'm going to be working on a diamond painting, and this is going to be a special WIP and Chat in that in a little ways into it, I'm going to start answering some Ask Me Anything questions that I offered that you guys could ask related to my own journey with getting getting an autism diagnosis and how things kind of led up to that, and what it's been like in the year since I got that official diagnosis as I've been kind of processing that and what that just looks like and how it's impacted my life. So thank you so much to everyone that took the time to send me an email or leave a comment on a video with questions for me to answer. I am very much looking forward to getting to that. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm working on and with, and then talk to you about a few diamond painting related things, and then we will dive into that part. So if you like diamond painting related videos and you'd like to subscribe, I would love to have you here. I do these weekly WIP and Chats on Mondays, and I do a variety of other kind of like reviews and unboxings, and every once in a while things like the pen stash video I put up this past weekend, or tutorials, and just, you know, I'd love to have you here. And yeah, so feel free to subscribe if you like. I am going to be working on the kit called It's Okay to Be Different, which is from Diamond Art Club. And the artist, they actually listed an artist name on the website. It's not on this kit though, and that probably has to do with something like, I'm just guessing, but if it's from like a stock, you know, website or something, you know, they probably have different like rules for where and how you're supposed to put artist names. But anyway, this is the original artwork. It's actually what's called a partial, in that the background isn't going to have any diamonds on it. It's just like the design, like the hearts and the infinity symbol and the sparkles, that will have diamonds on it. The words don't have any diamonds either, but this is one of the kits that Diamond Art Club released as part of their Autism Acceptance Month release, and just resonated really strongly with me. And I'm glad that I'm able to fit it in here at the end of April, which is Autism Acceptance or Autism Awareness Month. I did start on it earlier today, and my goodness, the special drills in this one are glorious. It's amazing. As far as accessories go, I'm going to be using this pen from Enabler's Outpost. We're going with a really rainbow theme here. This tray is from Yellow Dog Designs, and I really need to place an order with them because I believe they've made some updates to their trays since I bought this one, from what they told me. So I've got to remember to place another order with them, but we're gonna go with this one. I kind of thought the iridescent finish looked rainbowy, especially with that starburst on the top of the tray. And then the wax is from Not Your Mama's Mud, which is Whimsical Daisies on Etsy. And then this Rainbow Dazzle dot dot putty is from Butterfly Effect Wares. And then this is a minder that was actually sent to me by a very sweet longtime viewer, and a few years ago at this point, and I still love and cherish it so very much. But it's actually a sticker, which was from, I believe it's since closed down, but it was from an Etsy shop that was run by an autistic shop owner and artist that had created this. But they, this viewer bought the sticker and cast it in resin for me and turned it into a minder, which I thought was just wonderful. But I love this so much. And then, you guys, I'm also trying to branch out just a little bit, and I'm using Harbor Freight containers for this one. Since it just has 25 colors, I was like, ooh, I can fit this in a Harbor Freight set of containers, and I've been challenging myself to not use Elizabeth Ward containers every single time, but gosh, you know what? It's tempting because those are just, I'm so used to them. They're so easy for me. They have all the features that I like, but yeah, I'm trying to stretch myself a little bit. But anyway, let me get some fresh wax putty in here. We'll use the Butterfly Effect Wares Rainbow Putty. And there's already Not Your Mama's Mud in the single placer, but pretty sure that what's in here now for the putty is not Butterfly Effect Wares, and it's definitely not the rainbow one. So anyway, hello, happy Monday if you're watching this on the day that it goes up, or happy whatever day it is when you watch this. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. How was your weekend? I hope that you had a relaxing one and had the chance to rest and rejuvenate a bit. We certainly did here. And here is that putty, by the way. Isn't that glorious? I love it. And let me know, by the way, if you like what you're working on while we chat today. If you're diamond painting along with me, or if you're working on something else. Oh my gosh, that's so satisfying to see. I feel bad to have even like cut into the design, but oh, that looks so good. We'll see if I'm gonna need to like add any more, if that's gonna be enough. All right, so this metal placer, by the way, this is from Diamond Art Club. It's one of their newer thin metal multi-placers, and I use those basically exclusively now for my my multi-placers. They work great for me and how I multi-place and how I hold my pen and stuff. I love that they're really thin, so I feel like I can see really, really well. I'm just kind of, it's hard to section off partials, you guys. It's hard to know, like, wait, where do I want to put the tape? What kind of section do I want to do? So it's a little haphazard here. If I would have thought of it, I would have gone ahead and just grabbed some scissors and cut off some of this excess plastic where there's not even any design. So it would be a little less messy to deal with, but that's okay. Almost ready to go. Okay. At the moment, it's Sunday evening, and I am unwinding from the weekend as always. We'll do, how about up here? That'll work. That's not on the glue. Let me think. I think we're good to go. Okay, so this kit, I did start on it earlier today. I finished the kit I was working on with you guys last week, which was What's in Here from Diamond Art Club and Amy Brown. It was my dragon kit for the month of April, and it actually went faster than I was expecting. I was afraid that I was going to get really burned out on that beige background. These 310s I feel like are better than like the last batch that I had from Diamond Art Club. There's a couple that have bits off the side. That still is a better, oops, just bumped that recording arm. So sorry, you guys. Sorry. That's not bad. That's not bad. Okay. Yeah, so I finished that kit last night, actually, and that was fun to work on. It was really fun. I saved the dragon's face for last, and that was like fun to be anticipating and building up to. But yeah, the background was pure beige confetti. It was to give it that like aged parchment kind of look. And in spite of that though, I didn't burn out on it at all. It was fun to work on. May is just around the corner, and I suppose I'll have to think about what dragon kit do I want to work on for the month of May. I will probably dip into one of my small shop dragon kits for May, I think. We'll see. But yeah, I asked, words are so hard apparently. I've asked this before, and I thought I would go ahead and ask again, just to see if your thoughts have changed or if there are new folks here with other thoughts too. But I am always a little bit torn about whether or not to do a dedicated post-review video for diamond paintings that have been discontinued, like the kit What's in Here has been discontinued. A post review is just like I said, dedicated video where I talk about my experience with the kit, the pros and cons, and just try to give you a sense for both what that exact artwork would look like as well as what the company in general has to offer and what the features are, so you can decide if it's either a specific kit that you want to get or a company that you want to buy from. But I have very mixed feelings about doing dedicated post-review videos on kits that are retired. I know that there was the one kind of like vintagey kit I did last month that you guys, a lot of you had said that you would be interested in seeing a dedicated post-review on, and I know I haven't done that yet, perhaps this upcoming month, but for a kit like What's in Here, which is not really a vintage kit, it came out early 2022. I don't know if you'd have different feelings, but yeah, that was a fun one to work on. And it was nice to work on a rainy day kit too and get through that. So as far as my pen stash video this past weekend, that was really fun to put together. It was a tiny bit spontaneous. What happened was that my sneak peek from Diamond Art Club for last week, unfortunately, was delayed, that was the case for a number of people, I believe. And it is definitely unfortunate. Like that happens sometimes. But so I was kind of like, shoot, I don't have a Friday video after all. What do I want to do? And so I thought, well, let me get together my pen stash video and have that go up on Saturday. And, hopefully that'll kind of make up for it. It'll be a fun video to have over the weekend that goes up. My sneak peek is from last week is supposed to arrive today, the day that this video is going up. So you're quite possibly going to see a second video from me today, Monday, just later in the day, depending on when it arrives. And if it does arrive while my kids are at school and I can film really quickly and upload that, I probably will. So please do stay tuned for that if you're interested. My kit was Chroma by Margaret Morales, and gosh darn, I was really disappointed that I didn't have that one in on time to share with you guys ahead of the actual release. But it is what it is, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I realized that I had forgotten to go and put on a coordinating Zox bracelet to go with my WIP and Chat. I like to put on, if I think of it, like a cute, either just fun bracelet or something to have on, this wrist. Or if I have one that kind of coordinates, a Zox bracelet. And this is one that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. And the artist has actually popped up in the diamond painting world, which I love. And Zox bracelets, they have a saying on this. Typically people will wear this part on the inside, and then they'll wear it just with the design facing out. But I like the message of this one, so I have it on the outside. But yeah, I just thought it was very apt for this particular video. I also just really quickly, before I dive into the my story and answering your questions, I did want to just say really quickly, because I've had a couple of people mention something recently, and I just want to acknowledge and apologize and explain a little bit. But I've had a couple of people ask and point out that I don't always respond to comments or heart comments on my videos. And that sometimes they'll even see that I have hearted some comments on a video, but not all of them. And I know there are sometimes people that have been really hurt by that. And I do want to apologize and own that. You're completely right. I am not consistent about responding to comments at all. And it's something that I have struggled with for a long time. And I actually really, really hate that it's something that I struggle with so much. I could, offer explanations, but I'm afraid that would just sound like excuses. So I just want to say that I am sorry. I am regularly trying to find ways to settle into more of a routine as far as responding to comments and even messages and emails. I mean, honestly, I even struggle to consistently respond to texts from friends and family members. It's, I don't know if it's just a matter of getting regularly interrupted by my kiddos when they're home, or just trying to do too much and trying to balance too much. It's a big character flaw that I want to just say I'm sorry. I fully acknowledge and own that I may have hurt your feelings, and it's genuinely not personal. Sometimes I have the bandwidth and I go through and I try to heart and respond to a good batch of comments, and then it might be days before I feel it again, and then sometimes I don't try to go back and catch up on all of them because sometimes it's hundreds. So I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out ways so I can be more consistent about it. But I did want to acknowledge that at least here, because if there's people that are saying it in comments or messages, I'm sure there are others that aren't saying anything but are thinking it. So I just wanted to respond to that. And yeah, no, I'll say just last time, I am sorry. That being said, I'm going to shift into talking about, let me grab a drink of water. Talking about my just sort of what led me to pursuing an autism diagnosis and what that kind of looked like. And then I will respond to to all of your questions that I have found in my email and on comments on videos and whatnot. So I thought that first I might give a little bit of an overview of what my own journey has been like. And I think that will actually, how I talk about that may answer some of those questions. that some of you asked. But I'll still look through all those questions and try to respond to them as well, just in case. But yeah, so I got an official autism diagnosis last year from a psychologist. Was a psychiatrist? I don't think it was a psychiatrist. It was a psychologist. And it was over the course of a few days. It was quite extensive. There were several different kinds of tests that he did, and a lot of, questions. There was a lot of, asking questions about like childhood and background, and it was a lot. Like I feel like they really were trying to get as complete a picture as possible and try to provide as accurate a diagnosis and a report as possible. And I know for a lot of people that are, I feel like adults, like it can feel really difficult and intimidating to even find someone that will diagnose things like autism or ADHD in adults. I don't have ADHD, but that was something that actually we incorporated testing of just in case, because there can be some overlap of how autism and ADHD present. And I just wanted to be thorough, and the psychologist agreed that that was something we could absolutely do. But yeah, so taking it back though, when I was a kid, like when I was very young, from a young age, I feel like I was described by adults as being mature, very mature for my age. I just remember being like almost kind of proud of that at the time, and thinking that that was like a compliment. And now kind of in retrospect, I feel like I see it through the lens of, I think that they were just really like kind of surprised actually. And that was just sort of their way of like, it wasn't exactly a compliment. It was more like remarking on like something that they were noticing that was kind of unusual for a kid, I think. I was kind of a stereotypical like, oops, sorry to hit that arm again. I have you a little bit closer so that you can maybe see a little bit more of my placement, but that means that like my pen sometimes smacks the recording arm. I was kind of a stereotypical, like, straight A, academically successful student. I really thrived in that kind of environment. And I had friends, like, when I was growing up. Like, I had social circles and stuff from, like, kids in my class and shared activities and stuff. But then, like, when I went off to college, I did struggle quite a bit. I struggled, like, academically and socially. Like, I didn't really come out of college with what I had sort of expected would happen, which was... I hear a lot of people talk about how they made like their lifelong friends in college, and that just really wasn't the case for me. Like there's just a couple of people from college that I've even stayed in touch with. But then, I got married shortly after I graduated from college, and my husband has ADHD and was diagnosed as a kid. And so, funnily enough, I think it certainly isn't always the case, but I think that I've just heard anecdotally so many people say that like someone that's autistic and someone that has ADHD get married or like are in some kind of relationship because the neurospices attract each other. But just that being said, it felt like, there was a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding just for quirks, as I would tend to think of them. Various like little quirks that I thought that I had. Things like I'm incredibly sensitive to a lot of noises. Things that it's not just like I dislike the noise. It's, for example, the sound of someone chewing. It feels like someone is just scraping down my nerves. I feel it as physical pain. And I wish I were exaggerating. I would tell myself for the longest time, like, okay, you're being really melodramatic. Like what? It's just please get over it. Please get over it. And I wouldn't want to make a big deal about it. But no, I feel now like, okay, that's just an example of ways that I am extremely sensitive to auditory things. There are other like little quirks. Like I knew that I would, feel really off if my routine or if just sort of the way my home was set up or something about just how I would go about my day, if that were thrown for a loop and had to look really different for some reason, or even like not that different, I'd feel really off balance and off kilter, which I now know, like that was actually, they call it now dysregulation. And I also knew that in college, and even like to this day, I used to just think that, I'm just very much an introvert. But I always felt like being social and being in social situations was exhausting to me. And things that I didn't think other people tended to find exhausting. And I mean physically exhausting and emotionally and mentally taxing as well. And yeah, to this day, if I go out with friends for a couple hours, even if it's just like a one-on-one, a very relaxed spending time with friends, I'll come home and just immediately pass out for an hour. So various things that I really just always chalked up to, this is just a thing. Some people are this way. Fast forward to having kids. And when my oldest, I want to be really respectful about how I talk about my kiddos and respect like their privacy as much as I can and as much as I feel is appropriate, because I don't ever want it to be like, I'm exploiting my kids. I just want to share this from the perspective of, how this impacted and led to my pursuing a diagnosis or my suspecting. But basically, my oldest, I noticed that like he was behind on just a couple of like milestones, mostly related to speech and talking. And I remember at his 1-year checkup asking the pediatrician, like, is this something we should be concerned about? Like, what do you think we should do? And at the time she had said, like some kids, I don't remember exactly where he was at, but she had basically said, she's like, you can absolutely pursue speech therapy at this point if you want, but also I think it's perfectly acceptable if you want to wait and see, because some kids, it's kind of just like a switch flips at some point after their first birthday, and then all of a sudden they're talking a bunch. And so at the time we decided, we'll wait then. We're going to, see her again at his, I think, 18-month checkup. And then by his 18-month checkup, there still were enough concerns that we decided, okay, let's go ahead and look into speech therapy. And we actually, if you live in the state of California, if you have concerns about your kiddo that's under the age of 3, you may have access to resources through, in my area, it's called the Regional Center. It's a state-funded program, and we actually contacted them, and they came out and did an assessment of my oldest, and we actually, up until he turned 3, like, they paid for his private speech therapy completely. Like, we didn't owe anything, which was incredible. And so he started speech therapy, I think right around when he was 1.5. And then his speech therapy was at a center where they do like speech therapy and OT and physical therapy, occupational therapy and physical therapy. And it was during his time there that one of his speech therapists approached me and just said, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about a couple of things I've noticed with your son. A couple of things that, I just was wondering, like, have you noticed like these, behaviors, or has, this stood out to you before? And then asked, like, would it be okay if if I just had an OT just kind of sit in and kind of take a look and share their thoughts? And I guess, of course, I've always tried to be like really proactive and getting my kids whatever resources and supports they need. And then they came back to me and just very gently suggested like having the regional center come back out and assess Connor for some autistic behaviors. They couldn't do an official diagnosis because that has to be done by, at least in the state of California, that can only be done by, a professional like a psychiatrist or psychologist or pediatric, psychologist or something. But you could still get services under like qualifying behaviors or characteristics consistent with an autism spectrum disorder. So anyway, we went that route. And throughout this whole process, like when they would do assessments or when they would send home like assessments that they wanted us to fill out as parent reports, like things that we noticed and whatnot. It was very specific, different things. And as I was filling it out, or as I would hear feedback from, the teachers, by the time, he turned 3, then they transition over to the school district provides services. As we would go through that process and I'd hear, these professionals, share the results of these assessments with me, I just gradually started feeling like, but this is normal. Like, I did this as a kid. Or I'd talk about it with my mom. Like, I have a really good relationship with my parents, and I'd share with my mom kind of what was going on. And she would often say, like, you did this when you were a toddler. You did this when you were, little. And that's when it just started, it just kind of started back in my mind, kind of poking at me like, I don't, this is maybe there is something, going on here with you too. I came to find out later, this is actually an extremely common experience. It's happening a lot with my generation in particular, I think, where as we're having kids, especially I feel like, women or like female presenting, some people are calling us like the missed generation as far as like autism and ADHD diagnoses go, because, for a variety of reasons. But for a lot of us, it's like as we're having kids and our kids are getting into schools and getting kind of noticed for these things, how many of us are going like, wait a second, that's how I was as a kid. That's normal. What are you talking about? And that just kind of continued to be solidified to me. I had joined a couple of Facebook communities that felt like they were really supportive and like encouraging, very like positive minded in terms of for parents of autistic kiddos. And through that, I kind of was doing just a lot of like sitting back and listening and trying to learn and absorb what people were saying. And I definitely I wouldn't say like, I'm trying to think how to put this. I wasn't about to try to claim autism as like a label for myself at that point, because I just didn't feel like that was legitimate. I felt like that was just me wanting to have a label or something like that. But, it was over time. It kind of opened my eyes to the possibility. And I started just kind of really being introspective and thinking about various challenges I had or ways that I sort of saw the world and felt. And then it just eventually led to me wanting to just like, let's see if there's an option to like have just some tests or some assessments done and see like, is there something maybe potentially actually going on here? And then fast forward to, spring of last year, spring of 2023. And I had found through a database. I'm trying to think of where I initially found this. I think it was probably through one of the groups that I was in, but it's a database now. There's lots of disclaimers in there, but it was a database of physicians that, at least had outwardly said or were known for like, yes, we can diagnose things like autism and ADHD in adults. I may link to that below, but I really want to give like a huge caveat. Maybe I should have said this disclaimer up front. I'm not a doctor. I'm not any kind of medical professional. I'm not saying anything about you and what may or may not be going on with you if you're neurodivergent or not. I'm definitely not telling you what to do as far as support services or therapies for yourself or people that you know. This is purely just my own experience and what I was advised by various, professionals in my life. So big, huge disclaimer there, because I definitely don't want to be misleading to anyone whatsoever. But yeah, so I found someone that was not too far from me. There were a few here in Southern California, and it's not like, wasn't at all like a shady place. It was a psychology and psychiatry group that, was really well established, have been offering services. And it wasn't like hey, you want to get a diagnosis? Like, come to us. No, it was very legit. Because I feel like there's this sort of narrative that you sometimes hear out there where it's like, oh man, like everyone's got something nowadays. Everyone's got, this diagnosis or that diagnosis. And I just want to be clear that like, that's not what was going on here. But it was, like I mentioned earlier, just a long set over the course of a few days, kind of intake and assessments, and then a 50-page report. And I even had asked at one point, actually, the psychologist, I was like, I just am so worried that I have just been so immersed in this world since I'm the parent of kiddos that are autistic. I was like, I just am worried that like these results are going to be skewed because I think that this might be a possibility. And he kind of, he's like, I understand that. He said, but the way that this wide variety of tests are designed is to show, like, if there are inconsistencies or if there is something that isn't, actually going on here, it's gonna show up in, any number of different ways. And he's like, that's something that we that's something that we try to account for. That's why there were, a dozen different tests and assessments. Some were self-reported, some were done by him. There was some really interesting things that I had to do with like pattern recognition, and like coding. And there was like a thing where I had to, act out and demonstrate a thing where he was like, okay, walk me through. I know this sounds really crazy, but this is just an example. And they do this sometimes even with kids. But they glean a lot of insight from this, but it was like, okay, demonstrate with me, just, by verbally explaining and demonstrating, like with your hands, the process of brushing your teeth. And it felt so incredibly awkward and stunted. I was just like, this is so weird. But there was insight that was gleaned from that. So I feel like they are really trying to, what's the word that they use control for it? Like in the scientific method, they're trying to control for bias, basically, which I love. It made me feel a lot better and less like an imposter. So, and then, I got a 50-page report that broke down all the different tests they did and, pulled it all together. And so the DSM, which is the something medical, it's the official book for, and the set of diagnoses for mental cognitive disorders. I might have that phrasing wrong, so please don't come at me. But what are they on, the DSM-4, the DSM-5? The way that they currently diagnose autism now is it's varied. It used to be they would say mild to moderate to severe, so on and so forth. Currently, it's, levels based on, social, emotional things and rigidity and structure. So mine is, I tested at level 1 for both. And interestingly, as he was kind of unpacking that with me, he had said that, even though this is technically you think this is the lowest level of severity in terms of, getting an autism diagnosis, he's like, that doesn't mean that it's, any less valid or that you need any more support. He said often it's people that are on that kind of, they're highly capable in a lot of ways. And, the term masking is one you'll hear me talk about a lot, which is just this sort of idea that I know how to pretend like I'm neurotypical, how to, fake it till you make it, kind of thing. He's kind of walking that edge can sometimes be really difficult in its own way because people think that, you look and you act normal, socially, relatively, normal and whatnot. So there's less grace given for the actual struggles that you do have. And I thought that was interesting, but I'm not here to play the struggle Olympics at all. But I appreciated, how valid that was. I even asked, I was like, how sure are you about this? Is it possible that I tricked the test somehow? And he was like, no. This is pretty definitive, pretty confident in this. So yeah, there were some interesting things that came out of it. One of the things that was most validating about it was I've always been really frustrated at the difficulty I have with my memory. I feel like I have a really bad memory. And there was something that came out of the test that was it tested 5 different areas cognitively, and one of them was memory. And that proportionally had a much lower score than like the other things did. And it was almost just really validating to have someone go, no, I'm not just like, it's not that I don't care. I'm not trying to make a priority out of the thing. It's just that I have a bad memory. Like my brain, just the way it holds information, it's like an actual thing. But anyway, a year post diagnosis, it hasn't been like wildly traumatic or anything like that. I feel like I've had the chance to really come to terms with it gradually because, as things went on with both of my kids, from my oldest and then, having my youngest and going throughout kind of the process with him, I suspected more and more about myself potentially being autistic, and I think that kind of helped me gradually come to terms with it come to terms with the possibility before I was tested and diagnosed. So it's just been something that I've spent a lot of time kind of mulling over and trying to glean insight from and understand myself that much more over the past year, and hopefully help others that may be in a similar spot. Even if that's you that's listening, maybe feel like a little bit less alone and a little bit more seen. I really, really appreciate, there's another fantastic gal in the community that I talked with a lot around this time last year when I was, leading up to getting an autism diagnosis, or getting assessed anyway. And that's Hannah from Sparkling Spectrumite. And she has shared really authentically and vulnerably about her own journey to getting like her diagnosis and things like with her kiddo. And so please go and check her out. And I really appreciate how kind and sweet and supportive she was when I kind of came to her and I was like, hey, so I know you kind of went through this process too. What was that like? And so anyway, thanks Hannah, if you're listening. That being said, I'm going to hop over into the questions that you guys sent in. Drink of water. Like I said, I glanced through these because I kind of copied them all over into like one document so I could just read through them easily. I know I probably have already answered some of these, and that's totally fine. I'm still going to read through them. If I missed yours, I'm really sorry. I tried to be thorough in going through my email and through the comments on my past 2 weeks WIP and Chats to catch them. But if I missed you, please know it was not even remotely personal. I am not offended by any questions at all related to this, I promise. I did not exclude any because I was like, ooh, that's too personal or that's offensive. No, that wasn't me at all. So if I missed your question, just please know it was not on purpose. It may, maybe YouTube ate it because it likes to eat comments sometimes, or, I check my spam folder on email, but anyway, if I missed anything, it was an accident. So, I have a list here. So thank you to those of you that, to everyone that sent in some questions. So first, there's a gal, I'm not going to say her name because she said specifically, I didn't want to ask this publicly, but my adult son asked to be screened for autism. I would love to hear your adult diagnosis processes. Was the provider understanding? Is that the right question? Like, did they feel like you made it to adulthood, you can't possibly have autism? Or were they open to your feeling like you are autistic? This is a completely valid question. I know some providers will kind of potentially have that mindset. My personal experience with my providers, like I asked my primary care physician about it first, and she didn't shut me down at all. She just said, I don't feel like I'm not qualified to do a diagnosis or testing. But, she offered up some other people in the medical group that could potentially have done it. But no, she didn't shut me down. But it's hard. I feel like a lot of providers don't necessarily have as much experience because it's kind of a newer thing that adults are pursuing diagnoses, I think, especially ones that are not what we think of as extreme cases, which I think of more as just, it's not cases where people need a lot of support outwardly. So I would suggest you could, again, this is not medical advice at all. Just what I did was I started with my primary care physician, and then I tried to start doing some digging to find providers that seem to have expertise in the field generally of autism and ADHD in adults. So, but I do empathize with kind of feeling like people, whether it's just everyday people or providers, are going to act like, oh, it's not, you made it to adulthood, this isn't a thing. No, a lot of us made it to adulthood without like any kind of childhood diagnosis, in part because, this is really an emerging field where they're just constantly learning more and more about this. Even some things look different now than when my oldest was diagnosed, over 5 years ago. It's an ever evolving field. So, I don't think they were really diagnosing autism in girls when I was in elementary school. Like when I was a kid, that wasn't a thing, unless it was a really, again, what we think of as an extreme case, someone that needs a lot of supports and has a lot of challenges. That just wasn't a thing. I hope that kind of answered your question. But yeah, no, thanks for your question. And then Nikki emailed over a list of questions, and thanks for sending these over. She asked, have you watched any autism-centered TV shows? If so, I'm curious what your thoughts are as to whether or not these shows capture the true realities of dealing with autism. A few I have watched are Atypical on Netflix and Parenthood. I have watched Parenthood. It's been a few years. I think that, so the boy, the one son in that show, I think they said in the show that he had Asperger's. I don't think they diagnose Asperger's anymore, that they just kind of loop it in under the umbrella of autism now. I think that there were things about that were, real, but I haven't watched any other shows since then. I know there are some others, what is it, like The Good Doctor, some others. I know that just from some communities that I'm in that have autistic adults in them, there's kind of a mixed reaction to it. Some people feel like it is, it's good that it's being normalized, or feel like it is a good representation. And there are others that feel like it's really wildly off. But because autism can look so different in different people, I think, it just kind of varies. I think that I would be a fan of shows that present autism not as something that is this like horrible, awful, deficiency or disease that needs to be cured, but instead is just a different way of viewing and approaching the world, a world that is not built or designed for people that aren't neurotypical. So I think trying to like embrace and accept and lift up that kind of like that reality is probably what I'd be looking for in a TV show that, was portraying autism in some way. Okay, then you said, this is one I'm worried will seem insensitive, but I'm going for it. It's completely fine. Nothing is offensive. It's not insensitive. So please don't think anything about it. But I'm thinking about how ADD and ADHD seemingly have been freely diagnosed, especially in the past 10 to 20 years. It seems like everybody has it or has been diagnosed. Do you see the same happening with autism? Do you think docs are too quick to give out the diagnoses and prescribe medications? Or do you think it just seems they are because awareness is increased and people are learning more about autism? This is completely a fair question, and I mentioned it just briefly earlier. I think this is completely valid to kind of notice this and go, wow, like this, yeah, it seems like these diagnoses are really, that there's a lot more of it happening. And I genuinely think that it is just that we know more now, that medicine and like psychology are ever evolving and learning fields. I'm not saying that there aren't doctors out there that will misdiagnose. I don't know. I'm not going to say all or none. But I know that this was something that I specifically brought up with my, with the psychologist that did my testing, because I was so worried about like, am I just going with the flow and just wanting to have a label like everyone seems to right now? And that just wasn't what happened in my experience. So, but I understand why you would wonder and why you would ask. And another possibly insensitive question, but again, I'm not meaning for it to be, have you seen or heard people almost making their autism diagnosis seem like a flex? If so, how do you feel about that? Yeah, no, I mean, there are people that probably try to, like any particular challenge or big thing that people go through, I think that they might try to turn that into something that they're using in maybe like a not awesome way. But that's why I've tried to always be really authentic about how I talk about my experiences. But no, I mean, there's neurotypical or neurodivergent. Yeah, no, there are going to be people that will always try to use something about themselves to, I don't know, to do some type of thing, or to like use for, well, there's like sympathy, or like you said, like a flex. I mean, yeah, I think that could be a thing. I'm not personally a fan of that, but I also understand that it can be complicated, and people kind of process things like an autism diagnosis in different ways. So, oops, sorry. Gotta figure out a different setup for my camera so I quit smacking you guys. So, and again, you don't have to apologize at all for, or worry about being insensitive. So your next question was, I was diagnosed with OCD at a very young age, and I often hear people use that term freely without actually understanding what it means. People will be like, oh, I'm so OCD, I can't have a messy desk, and things like that. It used to drive me crazy because I felt people don't truly understand what it means to have OCD, and it kind of felt like they were making fun of it. Have you seen this happening with autism? I think a little bit. I've heard people, and frankly, when I think I would probably make those same kinds of jokes. I think when I was like in college, I think that was something that I would do just without really thinking anything of it. Yeah, it was a way to kind of joke about it and try to be funny or whatever. Just like, oh yeah, I'm so OCD, I can't stand, a mess or something. And knowing now, like, oh no, that's like OCD is a real thing, and isn't just like, oh, you don't like a thing. It's not just a preference. It's an actual different way that your brain, if I'm understanding it correctly, I'm sorry if I'm misspeaking, but it's a different way that your brain works. And like an actual, like I was describing earlier about how certain auditory stimuli I feel it as physical pain, and not like in a I'm trying to be melodramatic or exaggerate kind of way. Like I feel it as pain. I can understand like OCD. It's not just like, oh, you don't like this thing. It's that it's actually having a very real effect on you. As far as I feel like people are doing that with autism, I mean, maybe a little bit. But it's, there's a lot of, as we're learning more about it, and as it's, there are a lot of like, it can be really difficult to get resources like diagnosing professionals, that there are a lot of people, and myself to a degree, that feel that self-diagnosis can be a valid thing. I don't think you're talking about like a self-diagnosis thing. I think you're talking about people that are using it to kind of like make fun of. I guess I don't hear it in the same way that I've heard people do that about OCD. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did. So kind of, but it hasn't been as prevalent, so I don't know if I have feelings about it as yet. Next question. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you for sending in all these questions. No, they're good. They're good ones. Next question was, did you have suspicions about being on the spectrum before you had kids, or did having kids with autism open your eyes to the possibility of having it yourself? I think I probably kind of covered that, but not really before I had kids. There was a little bit of like, oh, I always felt like I was different, but then as an adult, I was like, oh, that's like every kid thinks like, oh, I'm different. I don't fit in. That's, every kid feels that way. And then you kind of realize like the world exists outside of yourself. But like in retrospect, I can look back and go, oh, these like kind of twinges or suspicions or wonderings that I had, there were some of those that were, legitimate, I guess. But no, it was mostly having kids and seeing them go through the process that just was really what kind of opened the door for me to wonder. Nikki's last question was, what were some of the first signs that your kids had autism? I'm interested in what some of the first signs were in the process of discovering the diagnosis for them and yourself. Yeah, so with my oldest, it was speech delay, and it just kind of was a organic next step from that to, okay, a speech therapist was seeing him and noticed some other red flags. Difficulty with transitions is a really common one, where it's like going from one thing to transitioning from one activity or one thing to the next, especially if it was from something they call it a preferred activity, which is something they really, really love doing, out of that to something else, having more difficulty than usual with that. Again, the shorthand was difficulty with transitions. There was that, and then just some of the ways that he would have meltdowns. that were different than kind of just a standard temper tantrum. And then with my youngest, it was like we were just ready to kind of see those signs. It's not like that we were looking for it, but it was more like, actually for the first year and a half, we thought that our youngest was just going to be neurotypical. And but then in retrospect, see some ways, like, because the way that autism looks in both of my kids is different. There's some things that are the same, but the way it presents is different in both of them. But the speech delay was probably the first thing for both of them. But I have to also say, I did not have a speech delay as a kid. I think that may be more common with boys, but it can vary. And again, not a medical professional whatsoever. But that's how, we kind of suspected with my kids. So thank you. That was the last of her questions. And I genuinely appreciate that you sent those in. And again, no worries that we're not insensitive. So the next question was from Helen and said, one thing I'd love to hear you discuss is what made you pursue your own diagnosis. Had you had a feeling for a while, or was it only once the kiddos were diagnosed? I have 2 kids and a husband with ADHD, and so sometimes it's hard to determine if I can just make my own symptoms fit it, or if I really do have it. Haha, I have anxiety for sure. I feel like you could be me, Helen, as my husband has ADHD, and it was kind of just like, am I just kind of like riding the bandwagon here? And also, I do have diagnosis. That was something else that came out of the testing that he did, because again, it was testing for a variety of things, like not just autism, but it was like confirming that, yes, I do have generalized anxiety disorder still. I think I kind of answered your questions though. I think that it can actually be really validating and actually be a good thing that you're wondering, am I just like making it up? Am I just faking it? I feel like wondering that could actually be a sign that maybe, go ahead. Like, don't worry about so much. Like, should I not even try like getting assessed for it? Because again, my experience, even though I was worried about it seeming like I was faking it, they had kind of controls for that in place. So, I hope that helps, but okay. Thanks for your question. The next question was from Gretchen, who said, a few questions I have in regards to autism. Has being diagnosed as an adult changed anything in your life besides just knowing? What do you most wish people who aren't on the spectrum understood about autism? Love those questions. Love them. How has being diagnosed changed it? I feel like it's validated me in a lot of ways. It's helped me be a lot kinder to myself in terms of, hold on, I need a drink of water. I give myself more grace in some ways. My husband actually reminds me to give myself grace sometimes. When there's something that I struggle with that I will just feel like this should not be hard. Like, this should not bother me. This should not be hard. And then I remind myself, like, there's a reason for this. You're not just being dramatic. So feeling sort of the validation and understanding myself a little bit better. I love anything that helps me understand how my brain works. And so it's been validating to have that diagnosis for sure, but I'm not one that's also going to like go and flaunt it, I suppose. But yeah. And what do I most wish that people who aren't on the spectrum understood about autism? I guess that, it's not this horrible, awful disease. And that it's, I think that the world would be a kinder place if we just were more, if it were more accepting of and built for people whose brains don't work in, a neurotypical fashion in the normal way. And that also that autism can just look really different depending on the person. There's something about this phrase that like makes me cringe just a tiny bit. I'm going to say it though, because I think a lot of people relate to it. But for some reason, it just feels like, I don't know, cheesy to me or something. But the whole idea of like, if you've met one person with autism, then you've met one person with autism. That it can look really different. And that like someone like me, who I've been told, you don't act or look autistic like at all. Like you seem like, you're perfectly socially capable, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, but that's called masking. Like, And a lot of studies are starting to show that a lot of particularly women and like women presenting, like the way that we grew up, we just, I don't want to try to get into this. This is really complicated and a very deep rabbit hole. But just there's something about how we were raised and like the tendencies that we tend to have on like a genetic, like on a DNA like level, and what society expects of women, even from a very, very young age, is that we just develop masking, which is the ability to look and act normal, quote normal, from a very young age. And that's likely a very large reason why a lot of our, my generation was missed as far as autism diagnoses go. But I don't know. I hope I answered your question okay. But thank you for sending in a question. The next question was from Janine. And Janine said, did something happen that made you think you were in some way autistic? Was it like an aha moment or some sort of thing you were doing making you think you might test on the spectrum? Jean, that's a great question. I think I kind of talked about it and what led to that it was kind of a gradual thing. And I don't think it was like a single aha moment. I think it was just sort of the pieces very slowly coming together and me slowly becoming open to the possibility that something else might be going on in my brain. So thanks for the questions. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to go past the 1 hour mark. I do want to respond to all of these questions. So this will be a little bit longer at WIP and Chat. I hope that is okay. The next question was from Susan, who said, how has having the diagnosis helped you? What was the process like? What prompted you to think you might have it? And have an awesome week. And then in a separate comment, she had said, and I wanted to mention, I'm very interested to hear about your autism journey. I've begun to wonder if I have some traits. I'm 56 now and did well in school, but I struggled in many other areas throughout my life. Yeah, I don't think you're ever too old to potentially pursue, being assessed and evaluated. I think I responded to most of your other questions, but I just wanted to, you're the second comment you had left. You talked about how you did well in school, and that's a very common story. That was certainly the case for me. Like, I was always straight A model student. Like, teachers never were complaining about my behavior. I was very much like a rule follower. I thrived in the structure of school. So I think that doesn't, just because that was the case for you, doesn't mean that like, oh, you couldn't possibly have autism or be autistic. I'm not going to get into it today, but there is dialogue behind the reasoning behind using like person with autism versus autistic person. But most of the autistic community at large feels that not using person first language is actually more appropriate. But I think that that's slowly being something that people are learning about. So if you hear me talking about like I'm autistic as opposed to I have autism, that is a deliberate word choice on my part and not intended to be, offensive. And I'm not going to be offended if any of you say person with autism, because I think that's kind of what the norm is at the moment. But anyway, not going to get into it today or we're going to be here even longer. But yeah, Susan, I think I answered your other questions as well. Yeah. So thanks for your comments and questions. The next question was from Nana the Bear, and they said, I'm looking very much forward to hearing about your journey to get your diagnosis. I was diagnosed with borderline myself about 15 years ago, but the whole process to get that diagnosis and the way my life has been since then have made me wonder if I was misdiagnosed back then. I've made my peace with it and learned to live with the fact that I have to be more aware of my mental health than most, and at some point I believe it makes me better to recognize mental difficulties in others too. I wonder if you feel the same. Yes, I agree. I feel like that, that's true. That's something that I didn't think of in responding to some of the other questions as far as how like, I feel like things have, changed since I got my diagnosis. I think that it's just made me that much more empathetic and understanding towards others and the mental health struggles that they may have, and knowing that, everyone is going through something, and, you don't necessarily know what's going on behind like the front that you see of the person, like how they talk to you or how they interact with you or how they present themselves. So, I do think that it's helped me kind of recognize and be empathetic towards others that are having difficulties too. So thanks for the question and for sharing about your own experience too. The next question was from Olive Grove, and they said, "Hi, Katie. Can you recommend a good book for adults about self-identifying and how to be in relationships with hubby or kiddos?" Ooh, oh man, I should have looked this up before I started. Olive Grove, I'm gonna try to find one. There's a couple that I see frequently recommended that are really good for like self-identifying. There are also some good resources out there, like websites. I will have some of those linked below for you and for anyone else that's interested that are, I think, positive resources and are geared towards adults. I also would point you to like some Facebook groups. I'm in a couple. I haven't been super active in them at the moment, so I don't necessarily know like how good a space they are. I feel like there's one I'm in that's called like Embracing Autism, and there's another one I can't remember. But there are some good like social like Facebook communities and whatnot that can be good resources too, especially for adults. So I hope that helps. I'll look that up, and I'll have some other info in the description below this video too. So sorry about that. I don't have that for you to share right now. Man, I don't know if it's allergies or if I'm catching the bug that Adam and my oldest have, but I just keep getting a dry throat here. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, next question was from Jody, and Jody said, "Hey Katie, love your channel. May I ask about the part autism has played in your life with social relationships and cues? You seem to be so socially aware of yourself, and my daughter, who is autistic, struggles with that. I know everyone has their own challenges, and the condition won't be the same for every person with a diagnosis. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us." Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to. It's I enjoy it and hope that it's helpful to other people. So with social relationships and cues, I was one, and this came up in the process of the assessments, that I kind of realized that, so I was a I still am a very avid reader, and was, reading ahead of kind of my age quite a lot, and realized that I learned, like I took a lot of learnings from books about how I was supposed to interact socially. And I also remember as a kid, there were many, many, many nights where I would be trying to fall asleep, but I would just be agonizing over, how to behave socially and what other people were thinking, and if I was doing it right, and thinking about like, oh wait, I should be talking in this way, or I should make sure that I'm, asking this kind of question. And so I think that was me, like some of that was masking. Some of that I think is just you're learning how to be social, like as a kid, as a human being. But I think some of that was me. It went to such an extent that I feel like that was part of me learning to mask from a young age. And interestingly, something that also did come up, because again, the assessment process was very in depth, and there were several notes that this actually really took me aback when I was looking through kind of the report of everything. But the examiner, the psychologist, sorry, I say examiner because that's like how they phrase it, like in the report, like the patient and the examiner, phrased it and said, I was almost offended when I read this because I was like, excuse you? Referred to like some of my my speech and my expressions and my social actions as blunted. And I was like, what? Excuse you? But then it kind of described just sort of, having a little bit more muted responses to things, just in terms of like body language and facial expressions, and kind of the, what is often a typical autism sign, but like not having good eye contact, specifically when I was the one doing the speaking. Like when I was listening, I was decent about eye contact, but when I'm speaking, I'm less good about it. So, you guys see part of it, I think, here, like one side of it here, but it is probably a little different than interacting with me like face to face, I guess. But I don't know. I think it can be complex. And there can be a lot sometimes that's going on behind what you see kind of on the surface, I guess. So thanks for your question, Jody. Next question and comment was from Moon Makes, who said, "A question for your future Q&A section I have is, was there a big focus on your childhood years when you were being diagnosed? I'm asking because I'm trying to get diagnosed myself. Most people I'm close to are pretty darn convinced I have some flavor of neurodivergence. I love that. But when I speak with my university healthcare, they put so much emphasis on my good grades throughout my childhood years. Is this a common experience? For me, I'm looking at ADHD with a big emphasis on executive dysfunction, time blindness, memory issues with face names and times years, as well as a multitude of other smaller signs. It sure is discouraging, but I'm still trying to power through and meet with a specialist. For sure, that does sound really discouraging, and I'm sorry that it has been difficult to get there and that, the university has put such an emphasis on your good grades throughout your childhood years. There was a good portion of it, like specifically during the intake, because we talked for like an hour and a half before I went in and did like a set of formal assessments. But like the initial part of the assessments was just him talking and asking questions about various parts of like my childhood and later on. And that wasn't just academics. It was talking about, how did your, parents describe you as a baby and toddler even, and how social relationships felt. And, they took note of all of that. But it certainly wasn't dismissed just because, you had good grades as a child. Like I said, I had straight A's. I skipped third grade. Like I thrived academically, but I don't think that's a representation of if you have something, neuro spiciness going on. So I hope you're able to find a specialist that's able to like dig into that a little bit more, because I think it's important for them to look at childhood and take that into consideration, but it should, in my opinion, just be one part of the whole picture. Like it should just be one piece. That should be one part of the insight they're taking from it. But I empathize with the executive dysfunction for sure. And even I have some blindness with like faces sometimes, and just how my memory processes things. So I empathize with a lot of what you're saying, and I hope that you're able to find a specialist that is helpful. I'm not sure if you're in the States, but I like I said earlier, I'll have a resource list linked below that is just, they may have specialists that could, help, that are just known to have a little bit more expertise in the area of diagnosing in adults. I don't know if there's anyone on that list that's outside of the US. There might be. So you could take a look at that if you'd like to. So good luck. And thanks for sharing and for your question as well. The next question was from Laura, who said, I'm curious about what led you to test for autism as an adult and what that diagnosis would lead you to do differently going forward. I appreciate your chats and love, your caring demeanor to us. Oh, thanks, Laura. I shared about like kind of what led to getting tested, but as far as what that diagnosis would lead me to do differently going forward, for myself, like I kind of mentioned earlier, it's helped me try to be a lot more considerate and understanding for myself, and I feel like it's also helped me understand my kids that much more, on top of their own diagnosis process or processes, and I like to think that it's helped me be more empathetic towards other people, and knowing that like whoever, the person I'm talking to or, have a friendship with or something, it's very possible that like what they're actually doing is masking, whether they know it or not. And, they might have something going on. Adam and I joke sometimes about how it does feel like neurodivergent people tend to like attract each other. And there's, sometimes you'll see people joke, and even like it's in meme form sometimes about like, how did they put it? It was like, so spoiler alert, if everyone in your friend group around you is autistic, then you might want to, consider getting assessed yourself. But again, not a doctor. Just, I do think there is something about like, we understand, like you tend to, even on a subconscious level, and even if there's not like an official diagnosis in place, you just sort of gravitate towards people who get you. And even without a label, I feel like there's just this sort of sense of, I get that. I just am sensing and I'm getting like our brains both operate differently, and maybe they operate differently in a similar way. So, if that answered your question, Laura, thank you for asking. The next question was from Irish Diamond Art, who said, if you're comfortable, could you share your experience of letting family and friends know of your late diagnosis and how they responded to this? Was it positive, negative, confused, etc.? That is a really good question. So I had told my parents that I was potentially getting tested, or that I was considering getting tested, I should say. And they had been looped in the whole process of like my kids getting their diagnoses, and my mom saying more than once like this is exactly what you did as a kid. And so I don't think it was terribly shocking to them when that led to me saying like, okay, I'm looking at potentially getting tested. And so when I shared with them the results and everything, my mom was actually in town when I went and got that like testing done. And she was super sweet and accepting and supportive, and was interested to kind of like talk about it and understand. And there's a little bit of like she and I don't know if my dad too, I didn't ask him explicitly, but I know that she at least felt some guilt and some worry about like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I missed this, like when you were a kid, I didn't know like you were, struggling or or something like that, like as a kid, and I didn't know. So I think she like felt bad as a parent, and I was like, no, like you were supporting me, and as much as you were aware of things, like you were meeting my needs as best you could. You just didn't have a name for it. And also like nobody really did. Like this wasn't a thing that they were really understanding and diagnosing in girls when I was a kid. So I was like, there shouldn't be any guilt here, Mom. Like that shouldn't be a thing whatsoever. As far as friends, I mean, it was easy to share with friends like in the diamond painting world and with you guys here, because, I feel like this craft attracts a lot of neurodivergent people, and I feel like it tends to be a really accepting and supportive space. As far as like some real life friends, I actually just shared with one of my closest real life friends just a couple months ago, and it had just come up, and it came up just in a passing, the conversation had gone in that direction. I hadn't brought it up to her before that point because I kind of thought, it's not a big deal. Like I don't need to make a thing out of this, but I was never worried that she was going to like be confused or be like, that's weird, or have a negative reaction. She was initially surprised, and she asked some more about it and was interested. But she was kind of like, oh, I just would never have expected that. So I feel very lucky that I had very supportive friends and family. And my husband, of course, was incredibly supportive the whole time, the whole process of getting diagnosed and whatnot. So yeah, I hope that for anyone else that is, going through that process and potentially looking at sharing with family and friends, that you have very accepting and kind responses as well. But also you don't have to feel obligated to share. That's completely your business. Like if and when you ever want to share about that. So don't feel pressured either. Thanks for your question, Irish Diamond Art. I appreciate it. The next question was from Jada, who said, "Hi, Katie. I'm curious to know the events or reasons why you were diagnosed as an adult. I'm not sure how to ask this question. What I mean is, did you always know unofficially, or did you have a moment where things just made sense?" This question completely makes sense. And I think that's why, a couple others have asked it, and I think I probably answered it earlier on, that I didn't really feel like I strongly suspected until my kiddos. And then it was kind of like looking back, in hindsight being 2020 and all that, I feel like I could look back and go, oh, well, that explains a lot of different things. So yeah. Thanks for asking. The next question was from, this is the last question as well. Kate, my friend Kate, asked, "Thanks for being willing to share about your autism journey. I keep having doctors tell me that there's no point in getting an official diagnosis if I don't need any kind of intervention, but I feel like it would be good just for my mental health to have that diagnosis. Have you found that getting your diagnosis has helped you, and was it worth it?" Yes and yes. However, I think that what you're encountering with doctors is unfortunately common, especially because there's the sense of it's not, if you're not going to start therapy for it, if you're not needing like an employer's note or something like that, then what's the point? There's no reason to fuss about it. I think that sort of attitude that can be prevalent in some medical circles is why there is a strong movement in the autistic community towards embracing people that do self-diagnose. there are some tests and resources out there that like the RADS test, that can be helpful for that. But I don't know. I'm not sure what to say about that as far as like self-diagnosis specifically. I think that it can be really validating to have that, and I'm not like getting any specific like support services for that. It mostly is just for myself, and it informs things like in my relationships, including like my marriage, and it's something I talk about in therapy, but it more has to do with like the specific challenges that I am facing that are rooted in autism, like my strong need for structure, my being completely like how hard it is to be social, things like that. Just knowing what the source of those has been helpful. But I also think that even if you don't get a diagnosis, like however you're feeling about it is valid, and what your struggles may be as a part of that is valid. So I hope you're able to find more professionals that make you feel more heard and can get you more of the support and whatnot that you feel like you may be looking for. So thanks, friend. Thanks, Kate. And that was the last of the questions. So you guys, y'all, thank you for taking the time to ask such thoughtful and wonderful questions. I hope that I was able to answer them pretty well and talk about just sort of what this has looked like for me. I guess I'm like thinking and realizing I don't know how much I talked about specifically what autism looks like for me, except just in the kind of answering this past question about how I guess I did. I was like, have I really even talked about like what that looks like for me? I think I did. But yeah, I do want you to know as well that I am more than happy to respond to any additional questions or thoughts that you guys might have. If you would like to share them in the comments of this video, or my email is always open, and I could potentially respond to them like in a next WIP and Chat, or potentially if I can get a little bit more on it, actually just respond to your comment directly. But know that I'm an open book at the very least, that nothing you ask or say is going to offend me unless you're setting out to be like cruel and mean. But I don't think that's not you guys. That's not the crowd that I feel like I tend to attract. And I love you guys for it. So I'm going to wrap up this WIP and Chat because we did go quite a bit over my usual 1 hour mark time, and I want to make sure I can get this video up for you guys to be up tomorrow morning, which tomorrow's Monday. I'm filming it's Sunday night, but I want to just sort of preemptively thank you truly, sincerely, and I don't mean that in a way that means that I'm not meaning it. I actually mean it when I say that I just appreciate how you have been very much a part of making this a space where I feel safe and fine and like okay to be vulnerable and share about this aspect of my life. And I know that I really resonated strongly with, and it helped me a lot to hear other people talk about their journey and what autism looked like for them and how it impacted them when I was, just sort of earlier on in the process. And so I hope that maybe this was that for some of you if you're feeling that, because like I said, like calls to like if you're a Sarah J. Maas fan. But no, like just, birds of a feather flock together and all that. So yeah, thanks for letting me share about that today. I know it was kind of an atypical WIP and Chat, but as part of, Autism Acceptance / Autism Awareness Month, I hope that it felt apt timing. So I hope you guys are doing really well. Like I said, I'm going to wrap it up here and not do my usual, reading, watching, listening to. We'll talk more about that next week. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, how about, I don't know if there's an infinity symbol, but there's definitely some rainbow symbols going on in the emojis that are offered. So some kind of rainbow symbol if you like. Thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more diamond painting content from me. I'm going to keep working on this kit and see what kind of progress I can make on it before the end of the month. I'll be back later this week with some more videos, including my month in review for the month of April. And, you might see a belated sneak peek / first look from me from Diamond Art Club. It's later today. But yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your week, my friends. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.